So, hey guys, this will be a repost of something I published back in 2023. I believe March of 2023. I could be wrong. But what it is a mini documentary that I was going to create a series of exposing my employer for all the wrongdoing. That not that they just did to me, but what they were doing to the citizens and to the firefighters, the rest of public safety, and the rest of the city employees. So I didn't continue with it because what I noticed was I was always angry. I was always angry because all this emotion kept coming back over me and coming back over me. On top of that, I was dealing with a very sick young man who recently passed away in December. And so I had a lot on my plate and I didn't want to be angry with my so-called brothers and sisters anymore. They did what they did. I did what I did. And I have to live with it, I guess. You know what I mean? And I do know it doesn't seem to be any justice in this world for people who walk in righteousness. So this is my mini documentary, just giving you a little insight on who I am and what I did in my past. Take care, be safe, look up, cry out.
June 27th, 2021 at 0841, I text my Fire Chief Mike Baraki, and he goes, "Hey Chief, I'm reaching out to you as Eric to Mike. Open debate is under attack, especially those who question the narrative of today. 4 great men in our recent history were assassinated for revealing the narrative warfare that was being used against the American people to subvert their thinking. Those great men were Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy. My first question is, are you aware of the VAERS reporting system at HHS? If so, are you also aware of the current number of deaths, life-threatening injuries, and permanently disabled post-COVID-19 vaccine? If you cannot reel this data off the top of your head, please give me a platform to speak with you. I'm currently home with a very sick young man, enlarged spleen, low hemoglobin, and partially collapsed left lung. Please give me a call or a visit." Shortly after this text, Fire Chief Baraki called me. We had approximately a 2-hour conversation. After the conversation, I then gave him the clinical trial from Moderna, which Suffolk Fire and Rescue was administering to its firefighters. This is proof 1 that he had the information. What we have here is an administrative letter from Fire Chief Baraki. He was placing me on fire administrative leave. This letter is a little bit out of chronological order. I have to kind of show it because there's so many moving parts to what I have to present, and it's very difficult to put it all in one package. There are 2 key elements I would like to focus on when it comes to this letter. For the last 18 months, we have continued to witness behaviors that have not been characteristic of your past behavior. As your leader, I have grown increasingly concerned about the reports that we have received and that I have witnessed. Based on reported behaviors, I am mandating you to use employee assisted program. And here's the benefits manager. What you will find with this 18-month claim of bad behavior is that there is not one shred of documentation or evidence that was presented to me via email, counseling, or any paper trail whatsoever that has been presented to me. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter if the entire fire department calls Fire Chief Baraki. If this information is not relayed to me, that people are complaining on me, it did not happen. That's how we have to look at it. That's how we have to understand it, is that there's never been one time that anybody has pulled me to the side and presented this claim to me. I also want to bring your attention to this portion of the letter where Fire Chief Baraki validates and gives credence to the Code of Virginia Firefighters and Emergency Medical Technicians Procedural Guarantee Act. On April the 13th, 2022, this was the 3rd time that Battalion Chief Wilson and Lieutenant Abraham violated my Procedural Guarantee Act. And I'll provide a copy of the Virginia State Code with this video. And what I mean by violating my procedural guarantee is that Lieutenant Abraham and Battalion Chief Wilson not once gave me forewarning or notice to an interrogation. After the first unlawful interrogation on October 18th, I lined up 5 individuals that could be a witness for me during these interrogations. 4 were active duty fire suppression members, and 1 was retired. They will be carbon copied to this email. With a very quick investigation, what you'll find is I was never allowed to contact them. I was never allowed to have a witness of my own in accordance to the Procedural Guarantee Act. Basically, what I'm building here is the character of Fire Chief Baraki, and I have all the documentation and evidence to show you the behaviors of Fire Chief Baraki and his command staff were less than professional at best and mostly criminal at worst. So Wednesday, June 30th, 2021, Chief Baraki sends an email. It's a follow-up from discussion regarding mask wearing while on duty. Just so I'm clear, that discussion, that 2-hour discussion with Chief Baraki had very little to do with me wearing a mask. And the message goes as follows. Eric, thank you for the great discussion on Sunday, June the 27th, regarding the use of masks and your health and welfare. Please provide in writing your request for exemption or relaxation of wearing an N95 or other face coverings while serving as a master medic for the Suffolk Department of Fire and Rescue, so that Chief Brogland can have a discussion and a dialogue with risk management, and we, the city and SFR, can address your concern and provide you a response. Thank you, Mike. So again, I still can't understand where this disconnect is. You saw the text that I sent him. I sent him the clinical trial for Moderna, and I talked on the phone for him for 2 hours, and it had very little to do with this mask. However, you will see in further documentation that I do go into the mask wearing issue, and where a lot of my issue comes from is the performance of my crew and fellow firefighter that I was witnessing. Things that I was witnessing in the field on calls, where my brothers and sisters constantly being in an oxygen deprived state. I can't tell you how many times, especially during cardiac arrest, that I witnessed my crews almost passing out. Their hands were shaking. They could not breathe. This is not right. And I reported this to the command staff. They never addressed it. When it comes to the mask, my main concern was every single firefighter with the department. So I don't know where the disconnect is. It's very sad and concerning to me that that 2-hour conversation that we had just turned into about Eric wearing a mask and just blatantly left out all the information that I presented to him on that day. Just so we're keeping count. The conversation was on June 27th, which was a Sunday. Chief Baraki sent me an email praising me on our conversation on June 30th. Now let's just do some quick math and count the months from June 30th to April. So 9 months short of 18. Oh, trust me, it gets shorter. So I responded to Chief Baraki's email on the same day, June 30th, 2021, and my response was as follows. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm currently off shift still with a very sick child. I will be turning in FMLA paperwork in the next few days. Please review all the attachments. Thank you, Eric. And here are the attachments that I supplied for the command staff. A letter to the SFR leadership, the right to refuse EUA mask, the right to refuse EUA vaccines, and the right to refuse EUA tests. And also an employer COVID-19 vaccine questionnaire, which was never answered. Also, to be clear, on this day, at this time, Battalion Chief Brogland, Deputy Chief Adams are also now aware of all the documentation that should have been revealed to every single firefighter in our department to allow for informed consent. Now, let's read my letter to the leadership.
Good evening, SFR leadership. I want to start by saying thank you for giving me a platform to initiate this critical dialogue. The information attached to this email will consist of case law, CDC, HHS data, VAERS report, and OSHA. Since beginning the mask wearing policies back in 2020, as a paramedic and advocate, I began to monitor my vitals. My baseline pulse was in the 60s, and blood pressure was roughly 100 systolic daily. However, after calls to service where facial coverings were required, regardless of type, N95, surgical, or personal mask option, my vitals were significantly increased. I also started to notice the effects of our crews. The vast majority of our crews on various scenes were short-winded while performing a mundane task. Of course, work of breath increased with exertion. I also noticed numerous crew members sweating profusely and other skin color presentations associated with compromised breathing during patient care or other calls to service, even during cool and cold days. As an allied health professional paramedic, my year-long observations are overwhelming from an assessment perspective related to myself and my coworkers on various scenes. I believe that as an organization, we should review some long-standing OSHA standards and definitions. 1. Oxygen content of 19.5 to 23.5%. 2. Carbon dioxide content of 1,000 parts per million or less. 3. All oxygen deficient atmospheres shall be considered IDLH. Exception: if the employer demonstrates that, under all foreseeable conditions, the oxygen concentration can be maintained within the ranges specified in Table 2 of this section, i.e., for the altitudes set out in the table, then any atmosphere supplying respirator may be used. 4. Medical evaluation. Using a respirator may place a physiological burden on employees that varies with the type of respirator worn, the job and workplace conditions in which the respirator is used, and the medical status of the employee. Accordingly, this paragraph specifies the minimum requirements for medical evaluation that employers must implement to determine the employee's ability to use a respirator. 5. Recognize the characteristics of the confined space. 6. Understand the physical signs and reactions related to exposures to such hazards. 7. If the space to be entered contains an oxygen deficient atmosphere, space shall be labeled not safe for workers, or if oxygen enriched, not safe for workers, not safe for hot work. If an oxygen deficient or oxygen enriched atmosphere is found, ventilation shall be provided at volumes and flow rates sufficient to ensure that the oxygen content is maintained at or above 19.5% and below 22% by volume. The warning label may be removed when the oxygen content is equal to or greater than 19.5 and less than 22% by volume. The department should take the approach as if we were sending our firefighters into a modified confined space or IDLH atmospheres until proven otherwise by an OSHA certified industrial hygienist. They should be properly equipped to measure atmospherics behind the individual's mask to prove they are genuinely safe. As it relates to me, concerning the mask facial coverings, it is in direct conflict with my faith. Throughout Scripture, wearing masks and facial coverings has always represented a negative connotation towards the wearer. Those who wore masks or facial coverings hid from society due to a shameful act, or those who had leprosy only converted their mouth. As stated previously above, there is also a physical element of harm taking place. Every time we perform our highly demanding critical thinking job in an oxygen deficient state, we invoke our stress response. These countless events will stack up against all of us over time, related to acute and long-term health effects. I realize there would be exceptions, i.e. hospitals, patients that request it, and so forth. I believe there should be more options for those who feel burdened while performing the task of a firefighter wearing the mask or facial covering. I have to speak on the vaccine, as it closely relates to mask wearing and facial covering. I have seen signs posted all over our city buildings, especially the municipal center. The signage reads as follows: notice, face mask in city facilities not required if fully vaccinated. That sign is in direct violation of the first principle of the Nuremberg Code. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have the legal capacity to give consent, should be situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, and other ulterior forms of constraint and coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable him or her to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires, before the acceptance of an affirmative decision by the experimental subject, there should be made known to him or her the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method and the means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected, and the effects upon his or her health or person which may possibly come from his participation in the experiment. The duty and responsibilities are ascertaining the quality of the consent rest upon each individual who initiates, direct, or engages in the experimental trials. It is a personal duty and responsibility which may not be delegated to another with impunity. The principles of the Nuremberg Code were adopted in December of 1947, which arose out of the horrific events of World War II. That sign is a form of passive aggression. It would be perceived as a type of coercion that would persuade a person to make an irrational decision. just based on the inconveniences of mask wearing. These signs could easily be hanging on our fire stations any day. This would bring on division. A firehouse divided will fall. Currently, as it stands, the perception to the vast majority of city employees is only positive information on the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. For example, unnamed officers within our fire department took it upon themselves to compile incomplete data and provide some form of education, aka coerce firefighters to receive this vaccine. Again, this violates the first principle of the Nuremberg Code. Those individuals are not trained in virology research. The vaccine is a new technology that has never existed in modern day medicine. What was their comparative analysis based on? We have to ask ourselves some serious questions. Why don't any of the firefighters know how to view and access the clinical trial they are participating in? Why don't most of the firefighters know they are even participating in an experimental trial? Most are unaware of the VAERS report. Why? Most are unaware of the data concerning the numbers of deaths, life-threatening injuries, and permanently disabled post-COVID-19 vaccines. Why? The vast majority of city employees are unaware of what EUA even means. Why? All of the questions are essential for informed consent. The VAERS site is updated every Friday. Here are some of the data points as of last Friday. Deaths, 6,158. Life-threatening, 4,982. Permanently disabled, 4,892. Just to get some perspective, that data set is worse than all reported vaccine injuries combined over the last 30 years, according to the CDC open source data. It is time for transparency. We need both sides of the conversation. If that is not allowed, then, of course, that brings up a whole other host of questions. For we wrestle not against the flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:11.
The unnamed officer which was spoken on in that letter was Lieutenant Jennings. On the resource page, I supplied another link to the Moderna clinical trial. Here's the homepage at clinicaltrials.gov for the Moderna vaccine clinical trial. This clinical trial was completed July 5th, 2022. So in late November, early December, Fire Administration sent out an email. More specifically, Deputy Chief Spicer sent out an email to Suffolk Fire and Rescue asking whether or not you wanted to take this injection. Nowhere in his documentation did he tell you that this was a phase 3 clinical trial, nor did he tell you this was unlicensed, unapproved. So now let's go back to my text messages with Chief Mike Baraki. And what you'll see is there's dialogue there. Never once in these text messages did he allude to me having bad behavior. Matter of fact, most of my text messages were sent to him praying for you while you were going through this little trial. He was some form of admin leave himself. Ironic, to say the least. So my last text message to him was April 13th, the day of the event where I was victimized by Battalion Chief Wilson, where he stood over me in a violent way in a offensive, striking posture. So I presented to him the event, that I was going to send him an email, what happened. And as you see, I sent this on April 13th, and he took it upon himself to read it 7/14/22, the day he terminated me. On August 12th, he asked me to call him. The reason he was calling me or wanted to speak with me on this day in August was he was basically going to tell me everything that I've been telling him over the summer was going to happen. I told him that Suffolk was going to present the test and the vaccine in a very coercive, tactical way. He did not believe me. Also, during this conversation, I asked him why the clinical trial was not released to the City of Suffolk employees. His reply was, "Do you want me to lose my job?" And I was like, "How can you lose your job for allowing informed consent?" And he just goes, "I'm following orders." Then my reply was, during the Nuremberg trial, the officers that pled that they were just following orders, what we found during that trial was that did not matter. They had an obligation and duty to rise above. I then said, "You were a coward," and I hung up. I guess if you wanted to initiate a month count on bad behavior, I can only assume you could start then for standing up for my people. Back to the text message. For some reason, these pictures that I sent him were all jumbled up. This was on July 11th. When I sent him this, the updated VAERS report for permanently disabled was 7,463. Patients who died post-COVID-19 vaccine was 9,048. Patients that experienced life-threatening emergencies, 7,412. I'm pretty sure nobody in the fire department, public safety, or city employee knew anything about this data, and it's far worse now. In closing, Fire Chief Mike Baraki purposefully concealed that his firefighters were entering a clinical research human trial and testing. The information provided in this video is just a sample size of the criminalizing evidence. All individuals associated with my dismissal were just classical bullies. These bullies ignored all my pleas for my fellow firefighters and myself. Of course, when the command staff and the leaders have a history of demonstrating destructive behaviors, endangering the lives of those they swore to protect. With that metric of measuring uprightness, the city of Suffolk fails. The leaders of this organization have no respect for law and order. You will see a blatant disregard for the freedoms and liberties of individuals standing up against unlawful, intrusive political policies. These political policy wolves looked at me like prey. These prideful individuals treated me like the enemy. How dare you stand up for your rights and those of your brothers and sisters? How dare you call us out on our human dignity and civil liberties violation? How dare you compare us to the likes of the Nazi officers who were convicted of crimes against humanity just for following orders? Rise up, brothers and sisters. You all got Jim Crow during this COVID testing and vaccination program the city of Suffolk ran. Signs were placed all over the city to cause division, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, solely based on wearing a mask. These signs could have easily been replaced with whites or colored. The policy wolves will always protect the funding versus the employee. The drug dealers forced their ideologies of health. Most took it without flinching or questioning, which is typically due to fear-mongering and threats. The city of Suffolk prevented the flow of information, purposely reducing your ability to be informed and armed with knowledge. And because of the lack of remembrance of those who came before us, you all let it happen again. Reinventing the 60s. Instead of color this time, it was based on a decision to take experimental, unlicensed, unapproved, technology-based tests or injection. These videos will be released across multiple platforms and to media agencies to protect my family and I from the possible vindictive retaliation from the leadership of the city of Suffolk.
If you have to be persuaded, reminded, pressured, lied to, incentivized, coerced, bullied, socially shamed, guilt-tripped, threatened, paid, punished, and criminalized, if all of this is considered necessary to gain your compliance, you can be absolutely certain that what is being promoted is not in your best interest.